together.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Ollie. I'm joined by my co-founder, Andrew, who will also introduce himself in a second. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about why you're going to end up in the wrong career and some kind of mental models that you can use to spend your time as wisely as possible at university and set yourself up for success. In terms of who I am, my name is Ollie. I graduated, did teach first, so I became a teacher in what was then voted the third worst school in London about the day before I started teaching there, which was interesting. And in my first maths lesson, I was called a fat cunt by about 10 different students on the first day, which was also good fun, which was like a total opposite experience of me. At the same time, I was lecturing at UCL. So I was kind of in two different extreme worlds. And then I, became the deputy head of maths in the school and realized that there are a lot of systemic problems in educational access, which is why recently Andrew and I started UniRise, which has a plan to end educational inequality in the UK and hopefully globally over the next couple of years as well. Andrew, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and then we can jump into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I dropped out of school when I was 16 to start my first company. It failed 1 month before my A-level exam. So I had 4 weeks to frantically self-study my A-levels using YouTube and weird exam torrenting websites. Ended up getting 4 A stars, going to Cambridge and LSE, then rejected my Cambridge offer because of imposter syndrome, which I'll talk about a little bit later on today. Spent 3 years at LSE. It was extremely boring. So spent all my time trying to start various different companies. In my third year, started a self-study edtech platform, scaled that to 100,000 users and an 8-figure valuation over the next 2 years. Then went traveling for a little while in search of the next chapter. And came back last summer. And since then, I've been working with Ollie.
Good stuff. Cool. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'll speak for the first kind of 7 or 8 minutes, and then we can hand over to Andrew, who will finish off. But yeah, so there's this kind of main question that you're all probably thinking right now, which is like, what the fuck should I do with my life, and how should I spend time at uni in order to maximize my chance of living a successful, fulfilling, and happy life? Just wanted to share a couple of insights with you on this. Firstly, it's really stressful. Like, a lot of people are going to say to you, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I used to hate that question, and I still do. And then, like, sometimes I answer saying this because I just think it's like a little bit of a difficult question. But basically, none of us know what we're doing with our lives. And even when you graduate, you'll find the same thing. There's a ton of myths when it comes to like careers in the job market. So a lot of people say things like, I'm never going to be able to get a job in this industry because I never formally studied it, or I'm a university graduate and I've got a 2-1 or first from a Russell Group university. There's a job out there waiting for me. Or I have to make a decision between choosing a job that I love and that's interesting and stimulating, or a job that is high paying. Or I don't want to pigeon myself in the wrong career path before I know what I actually want to do, which is what a lot of people end up going into, particularly my friends in finance. And then there's the last one, and a lot of people give this advice, which is like, oh yeah, find your passion and do what you love. Hashtag like new age philosophers on like TikTok and Instagram. That's like nice advice, but often it's not that easy to realize what you're passionate about. And sometimes that passion won't make you money, at least in the short term. So often when people say that, I don't find that particularly practical as well. When you're thinking about your career, a lot of people talk about this Japanese concept called ikigai, which is basically the intersection between what you love doing, what you're good at, what you could be paid for, and what the world needs. Again, relatively useful framework in terms of thinking about what you want to do with your life, but it's quite hard to answer these questions as well. So one kind of myth I want to debunk is this 10,000 hour rule that you might have heard about. To become an expert at anything or good at anything or know what you want to do, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing it. Not to say that you won't be good at something if you spend 10,000 hours, but the way I like to think about university, particularly my time at university, and what really helped me figure out what I love doing, isn't the 10,000 hour rule, but it's actually the 10,000 experiment rule. So most of you are probably in your first or second or third or final year at university. And one thing I'd really encourage you to do is hypothesis testing. So in your first year, you might come up with a hypothesis. I think I would find a career in social media marketing interesting because I've been on YouTube, I've watched some people, like, I think that's interesting. That is your hypothesis. This is what I did. I went to test that hypothesis by working in a social media marketing agency and quickly realized I don't find this very interesting. But having networked a lot during that internship and having learned a lot about my strengths and weaknesses, I was like, okay, I like the strategic side of it. I just don't like being on like Instagram and Snapchat and stuff all day long. So my next hypothesis was, okay, I want to work specifically in conversion rate optimization, which is like taking a landing page and increasing the number of people who end up buying instead of just browsing. So that was my next hypothesis. Reached out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn, found an internship, did the internship, networked like hell, and realized actually, I'm actually quite good at this thing. I'm quite good at it. And then I just keep on iterating these hypotheses until I ended up doing consulting and banking and teaching and like international development work. I tested like 10 or 15 hypotheses whilst at university, all through networking basically on LinkedIn, which meant that when I graduated, I was so much more self-aware than other students, or than most other students, because I just tested all these hypotheses, networked, brought on mentors from these different industries that I worked in, and they helped me figure out what I love and what I don't love doing. Another thing that's really important is doing stuff that's high ROI, so high return on investment. There are so many things you can be doing right now as a student to accelerate your career that you're probably not doing. So one is networking. I'm releasing a whole blog series on networking, so I can share with you my newsletter afterwards. Most people get networking wrong though. They just kind of like reach out to people for an awkward call and then ask them questions and like, that's it. One platform I'd recommend use is lunchclub.ai, where they match you with up to like 10 people a week using apparently AI, but I don't really believe them, an AI platform where you can like meet people and et cetera. Another thing I'd recommend is actually building a personal brand. You might think you have nothing to say. I think, Charlie, you're doing this as well. You might think you've got nothing to say, but actually, if you just write whatever, like at the start, quantity is better than quality. You start blogging, you start vlogging, you start a podcast. Andrew and I started one recently. My friend Julius at uni, he started making like little videos on YouTube, and now he's got the most liked Facebook page in the entire world, more than Obama and Trump combined, with 32 million followers, just because he started posting like prank videos with his friends. Work out what criteria is important to you. Andrew's going to talk about that in a little bit. Meet smart people working on cool things and literally just work with them. So if you find a company that you're passionate about, or if you think the people who work there are particularly interesting and can mentor you, doesn't matter if you're being paid or not, just go and work with these people, because they will teach you so much that you would not be able to learn if you just did like a random internship in a random consultancy or banking firm. And the final thing is learn how to learn. Learn certain mental models that you can use in order to make good decisions in your life. Learn skills that will be really useful in the future, like social media, or how to write good emails, or how to make good decisions. Again, these are all things that Andrew and I kind of write a lot about, so we can share some information on that later. I'm not going to do this last slide because I'm 1 minute over, but if you have any questions, we can talk about that. In the meantime, I will pass it over to Andrew.
Yeah, sure. I don't have any slides, but I'll see if I can just wing it. So I think the sort of underlying problem with how students make career choices at the moment is sheep thinking, or reasoning by analogy. So reasoning by analogy is when, for example, you see a bunch of people crossing the road, you're like, oh, they're crossing, so I'll cross as well. And that works when it's sort of common sense problems like crossing the road, but it totally breaks down when you're trying to make highly personal, individualistic, high stakes decisions like, what am I going to do with the next 10 years of my life? So for example, I meet so many students who are like, you know, my dad's a lawyer, so I'm going to become a lawyer. My girlfriend started a startup, so I'm going to start a startup. Everybody at LSE is going into banking, so I'm also going to go into banking. And again, this could work if it was something as simple as crossing the road, but it just breaks down when you've got something as heterogeneous as your career decisions, because like you might really like creative work, whereas bankers really do lots of like boring, repetitive, analytical work. You might like lots of free time and adventure. Other people like stability and direction from other people. So with something as individualistic as your career trajectory, I think it's really important to ditch reasoning from analogy and instead use first principles reasoning. So I'll just walk you through this. The first thing you can do, ultimately, what are you looking for in a career? That's the first question you have to answer yourself. And then you can kind of build up from there. So a really good exercise that I do with a lot of my coaching clients and students that I help is I get them to open up their phones and sort of just scroll through their photos and make a note of the happiest points and the unhappiest points in their lives, and make a note of what's going on in those moments. So for example, when I did this exercise quite recently, what I found is, wow, when I'm learning stuff continuously, I'm so happy. As soon as I stop learning stuff, as soon as I start, for example, focusing on money or things like that, I stop feeling motivated and actually get kind of depressed. So that was one of my core values. Other core values were adventure. I really value freedom. I really value deep, meaningful conversations. And so once I'd established like what things I value in life, I could start to look for career options based on that. Okay. So for example, right now, I am building a startup with Ollie, and I have no technical experience, but I love learning. And so instead of hiring a developer, I'm actually coding the platform all by myself, and I'm really enjoying it and I'm having a great time. And that's not a decision I would have made previously, because I would have thought it's not very sensible for you, Andrew, to sort of learn to code in the middle of like a, you know, a high growth startup trajectory. But actually that's what's going to make me happiest. So you can use this kind of logic. Once you have a list of the things that you value in a career, you can kind of cross-reference career options against your values lists. So for example, if you're somebody who really values stability, financial security, you don't really care about your job or if it's meaningful, then dude, like go into finance. That's wonderful for you. And you're going to actually like be very fulfilled by that career because it's ticking the boxes on your little sort of values checklist. On the other hand, like me, if you're kind of artistic and creative, but you also want to have impact, then maybe entrepreneurship or some kind of freelance career makes a lot more sense. So once you've got your values, you can use first principles thinking to kind of work out like what's really going to fulfill me the most. And often, you know, you'll start off going in the wrong direction. So Ollie kind of mentioned that, you know, Ollie went through like 10 different iterations of different careers before finding out what really sort of fulfilled him. And that experience is really useful because it can help you kind of iterate on your values. So you might think that you value kind of adventure a lot, but then you go and work at a startup for 6 months and you find that actually, I don't really like this kind of adventure, like do whatever I want, lots of autonomy. I'd actually prefer to sort of work with someone who knows what they're doing and get a bit more stability. So that's my first bit of advice, is to find your values, scroll through your photos, look back to sort of your life data, experiences when you felt fulfilled and less so. And from there, kind of work out what careers would most likely satisfy you. The second piece of advice I would have is avoid premature optimization. So you see this a lot, like 21-year-old kids are dead set on becoming a lawyer. They'll spend the next 10 years sort of working their way up. Then at age 32, they'll fall into existential crisis and be like, wow, I've just wasted my 20s chasing this sort of corporate dream. This is a very sort of cliched story. And it happens because of premature optimization. So you are optimizing too early. You don't know if you really care about law or not, and you're diving into sort of like a 10-year law trajectory. So this goes back again to something that Ollie mentioned, which is sort of hypothesis test, try lots of different things, and don't worry if that spills over into your kind of graduate career. Being totally honest, despite having had some successes, I would say it's only like 3 months ago, so I'm 26 now, 5 years after graduating, that I've got a really good handle on what I really want to do with my life. And that's happened because I didn't sort of confine myself to one job or one career path. I sort of allowed myself to experiment. And now that I know, or I feel very confident in, you know, this current mission I'm working towards, now I'm optimizing, now I'm doubling down, now I'm putting in lots of effort. And, you know, hopefully I'm going to stick with this for the next 5 to 10 years. So that's piece of advice number 2. I think I'm running a little bit low on time. So just part 3 is about getting brainwashed. So again, all sort of to do with the same idea of sheep thinking. So what I've noticed recently is a lot of students are getting disillusioned with banking and finance jobs. And so they're moving into sort of the startup thing. The thing is, like, startups are just another bubble. You've got banking, you've got finance, consultancy, law, and startups are just another bubble. And, you know, recently I did an analysis of the 625 startup unicorns. and virtually none of them were working on actual meaningful issues. So if you take, for example, Gymshark, their mission statement is helping people unlock their full potential. They sell clothes with Gymshark logos on them. Klarna is sort of a mobile credit app. They unlock financial freedom for customers. What they really do is help people buy on, help people buy stuff they don't need on credit. Deliveroo, revolutionizing the way we eat. They help fat people get slightly fatter and slightly lazier. So all of this startup hype, I would encourage you to sort of see it for what it really is. Like, is this company actually doing something meaningful? Don't get so swept up by the mission statement of the company, because virtually every company talks about how they're driving impact, how they're changing lives. But ask yourself, are they really? Is the work that I'm doing here actually going to affect somebody's life? So that's point 3. Point 4 was imposter syndrome, but I don't think I'll have time to get into it. So what I can do is just link to an article that I just finished writing on how to deal with imposter syndrome. But I think that's another really important thing to tackle, because so many students just feel like, oh, I'm not good enough to go into this particular job, or I'm not good enough to start this business, when actually, the opposite is often true. So yeah, I think I'll wrap up there. Sorry, it wasn't as coherent as Ollie's, and I didn't have slides, but hopefully you got something from it.
Yeah, so we've got like just under 10 minutes left. Just happy to open up any questions about what we said, or what we're doing right now, and any general things that you might want to ask.
Awesome. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate that. That was a really good talk across like multiple points towards like understanding your own career. I guess I've got a starting question, and of course we can bring everyone else in as well. My kind of first question brings together both points of the imposter syndrome, but also avoiding the sheep thinking as well. So I know, Ollie, you spoke about the hypothesis testing and refining what you want to do by trying them out. And then Andrew, you said don't over optimize too early. So with those 2 points in mind, there's almost 2 routes here. If you try something, say for 6 months, we'll take that as like a reasonable amount of time to work out whether you like it or not. Then is the output to decide, okay, I like it on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe at 6, 7 out of 10? Or is it, like you said, to work out what elements of the job, what elements of the role you enjoy, and then double down on them? Or is it to keep exploring until you've got a grasp of most, or like quite a lot of the options you wanted to explore, and then double down on the ones you enjoy? Or should you follow the part of that first role you really enjoy first, but not necessarily optimize into the industry, but be like, okay, I know I like team working with really creative people. That's something that I should always now value going forward. Or should you keep that open before doing it too late on?
Yeah, so I would say if you're like 18, 19, so the earlier you are in your sort of career journey, I think the sort of wider you should cast the net. So, and the reason I say that is because of confounding variables. So for example, you might discover that you really like working in teams when you're 18 at some random internship. That might not actually be true. It might just be that you liked the people that you're working with in that very particular team. And so it's very easy, if you sort of extend this logic, to misattribute what you really enjoyed. So you might think it was the teamwork, but it might have actually just been some specific people in that company. And so actually what you're looking for is friendship at work as opposed to teamwork. So at the very start, I would just sort of cast the net very wide and try lots and lots of different things. So just to give you a flavor for that, I already mentioned, I started my first business when I was 16. We did so many things. We sold personalized USBs, we did car washing, we created this product called the Cable Stable. I got to talk next to Boris Johnson. And that gave me like a really good flavor for things. And then at university, I did 11 different internships. And so I kept on sort of collecting data points. And I think that gave me like a good sort of data set to work out what I really enjoyed. Yeah.
Nice, awesome. And then feel free to open up to anyone else. If anyone's got any questions, just unmute yourself and ask one.
I don't mind jumping in. I think that the point I'd add to that is also not just coming at it from that analytical, logical side of collecting those data points, but also thinking about that emotional side too, and actually what's that gut feel that you have, and something that I think about in my own imposter syndrome when I'm making decisions is whenever I find myself saying should I to somebody, whether it's my parents, my friends, my peers, I kind of just think, well, I'm just looking for permission. So the answer is probably yes. So I don't know if that resonates, but my question for you both really is about how those big startups, those organizations, those unicorns you mentioned, those billion-dollar brands, how do we see past that sort of sensationalization of their mission as young people looking to businesses as to what we should do or who we should work for?
Yeah, so I often ask this to sort of founders I coach, and just I use it to probe into startups generally. And it's, if this startup didn't exist, would anyone's day-to-day happiness actually be affected? And so if you ask those questions about things like Deliveroo, Gymshark, other companies in that kind of field, you know, the answer's at best ambiguous. And if you're being kind of harsh, it's probably no. Like, I don't think anybody would really care that much if Gymshark went bankrupt. You'd probably just switch to some other designer brand of gym clothing. Same thing with Deliveroo. Takeaways have existed for the last sort of 40 years. It's not like a recent phenomenon. So, in my personal case, I think getting rid of Deliveroo would probably make me healthier and less inclined to eat junk food. So I think that's a useful question.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, well, firstly, I'd be miserable without Deliveroo. So, but secondly, so startups have got really good at copy, like a really compelling vision statement and a mission statement, and like this is Deliveroo and the values or whatever. I would not read that and actually think, like Andrew said, from first principles, like, what is this company doing? So Klarna, for example, where like if you want to buy something expensive, you can buy it in like over like 2 months. That sounds quite cool because people can buy stuff, but then it's like, actually they're going to buy stuff for things that they can't afford yet, which means they probably shouldn't be buying it because they probably haven't got savings. And then what interest rate are they going to have to pay? And you realize actually it's a bit like payday loans, but it's been like glamorized into a startup with maybe like slightly lower interest rates. So stay away from like the missions and the visions, read that afterwards. And then I think you'll be in a decent place. We've got one from Samuel, then Helen.
I was going to, I'm not muted. That's nice to know. I was going to ask, do you have any advice for people that they've done their iterations, they've found what gives them value, but they can't find a single role that kind of encompasses enough of what would make them fulfilled? Like, is there a way of they can prop it up with something else? Like, do you have an advice for in that situation?
Yeah. Could you go specific into your particular use case?
I can't think of a specific example. I'm just thinking a lot of, if you go by job specifications and what the role includes, it'll be, you've found what you like, but is there something that actually exists that where you can apply that to? It just feels like there might be that as a restriction on.
Yeah, for sure. So, I feel like I'm like literally in this boat in that, look, I really enjoy like creating art. I like writing, but then it's quite hard to mix that with like an analytical managerial startup type role. So my current split is I work 4 days a week on the startup with Ollie. And then actually today is like my content creation day. So I'm starting a YouTube channel. We do the podcast, and then I write and I create art. And that's quite a strange mix, but it's totally feasible. And even within a company where you've got a bit more restrictions, it's still possible. So you could negotiate, for example, hey, look, I love this job, but I can't do it 5 days a week. I want to do it 4 days a week, or I want like a half day off on Friday where I can do these things. Or you could say, look, I'm happy to take a pay cut if you let me do this particular thing that I'm not really qualified to do right now. So for example, if you let me redesign your Instagram posts because I like art, I'm happy to like drop my salary by 5K or do something to compensate for it. And so, when I've had interns in the past, we'll usually do 4 days of productive company stuff, and then I'll allow them their 5th day of like 20% time. So time to themselves where they can just do whatever the fuck they want. It has to be related to moving the company forward, but it's very kind of open. And so, a former intern started like learning to code and built this crazy voice recognition algorithm thing, which is really cool. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
And we're also hiring interns. So if any of you are interested in working like a very high growth education tech startup with I think actual impact, but obviously do the research yourself, then we'd be keen to talk to you. Helen, your hand's up.
Yeah, so you touched upon avoiding sheep mentality, but something that's also been given as advice to me is, learn from mistakes of others who have come before you. So how do you balance learning from people around you while avoiding that sheep mentality?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. It's difficult to, I suppose, answer in the concrete. Is there like a specific example of like I don't know, like a mistake that a friend has mentioned or something like that?
Nothing that comes to mind.
One thing I'd say, Helen, is so I don't think learning from other people's mistakes is sheep mentality. So sheep mentality is like everyone's walking on this hill, and then there's a cliff, and they fall down the cliff. And learning from other people's mistakes, and like, hold on a second, they all die after they walk off the cliff. I probably shouldn't do that. So if anything, it's a good thing to learn from others' mistakes. I think the one thing I'd be really careful of is what Andrew mentioned before. It's like causal misallocation. So people might think, oh, I made this mistake by going for this promotion and then I ended up getting fired. But to which you might say, oh, actually, I'm never going to try and go for a promotion or get a pay rise. But their story is a very particular instance with a particular set of stakeholders, and they might not actually understand the real reason why they got fired. Maybe that was an excuse for them getting fired. So I think there's always a lot of imperfect information when you're learning from other people's mistakes, or even learning from your own mistakes. It's very easy to create a causal reason that's not actually true. So I just think be really cautious and analytical when you are trying to learn from other people's mistakes.
Okay, thank you both of you.
Perfect. I think that's pretty much we've got time for. Pretty much bang on as well. So thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate your time today, and a great kind of conversation more than anything else. And definitely will be following you both on LinkedIn, of course, afterwards as well. So I appreciate it. I'll send across the video and everything else, and the recording there.